Welcome to Leadership Unfiltered, the podcast where real leaders get real about what it takes to succeed in today's fast-paced corporate world. I'm Dr. Dayan Douse, founder and president of P.R.I.D.E Consulting, a human behavior and development company serving as an executive coach and facilitator, working with organizations to deliver practical ways to evolve teams, advance organizations, and transform cultures. I hold a PhD in organization and management with over 2 decades of leadership experience in Fortune 500 companies. And I'm best-selling co-author of the book, Nothing But Net. I'm joined by my co-host, Phillip Smith. Phillip is a seasoned technology executive with extensive experience leading large-scale engineering teams and driving digital transformation. Over his 25 years of leadership experience, he has held multiple roles from supervisor to vice president. His personal brand is coder by blood, architect by trade, and leader by choice. Every episode will deliver real-world strategies, unfiltered advice, and the tools you'll need to take your leadership to the next level. Let's get started. All right, today's topic is building a high-performing culture. And this is an interesting topic that we've talked about, and I've worked with different organizations on starting with what do we mean by culture. When we talk about culture, it is really the beliefs, the behaviors, attitudes of the employees that really defines how those employees will interact and the character of that organization. And so this is a key topic for me because oftentimes organizations that you see at the top of best places to work and those sorts of awards are given to those organizations that have high-performing cultures. They know who they are. And everybody that comes to work for that organization not only comes there because they're seeking an opportunity, that reputation of that company is that they have that type of culture, and everybody wants to work in a high-performing culture. There's also the flip side of that, is when you don't have a high-performing culture, or that culture isn't well-defined, then that can also ruin your reputation as a company. So this is a really important topic. And so I have recently been working with an organization where they confused their values, their beliefs and attitudes of their culture with priorities. And so they had written down 5 or 6 key priorities for the organization, which are important. Mm-hmm. So no doubt they needed to know and have those written down. But they were confusing those with culture. Mm-hmm. So when I went in and we're doing a workshop, and I wasn't going in to that workshop, it wasn't a culture workshop. But some of the things I was seeing play out in the workshop made me think that there was a problem with culture because of the way they were interacting. And so as we're working through this leadership topic, there was arguments that started. And they were telling me stories of other leaders, not in the room, who had filed lawsuits against the company. And I'm thinking, maybe we want to pause on this leadership topic and talk about your culture, because there's a problem. And I mean, it just got worse. That lawsuit that was filed was from a senior executive that filed a lawsuit. Now, if there's something going on in the organization that a lawsuit needs to be filed, then that person has all rights to file that lawsuit if they feel like that is warranted. Mm-hmm. So I'm not dismissing that person had the right to file a lawsuit. The fact that the response of the leaders in that room didn't see any connection to the culture is what drew my attention. And so I asked them, so from a cultural perspective, how are you handling this? And they went back to the 5 priorities. They said, well, we have to do this and this and this and this. And I said, that's great. That does not answer the question, nor will that help you with the lawsuit. What is your culture? What are your values? And it turns out they had not written down any values. And so we then embarked on an exercise of going through what values were important to them. We crafted those values, and that started in a short amount of time, just knowing what the values were. It started a different conversation in the room. They were interacting differently because the values, whenever they were outside of them, reminded them what they were supposed to be about, how they were supposed to interact. When there was a problem between them, how they was to solve that problem. We've worked with companies that have brought in values, that have totally shaped the culture, and it has been masterful. Because then every conversation starts with a reminder of the values first, right? So I know there are leaders, I have done so, that I start all of my meetings with those values. And we start out and we talk about those, because they aren't just words, right? They aren't just words that you write up and put on the wall. You need to talk about them and what they mean to each person, what they mean to the decisions, because the values help you make and shape your decision making. And so we would talk about each one. In this case, there were 4. And we would talk about the importance of those 4 things and the impact that they were having on the work that we were trying to get done, and quite honestly, the day we were having. That is a instance of when values help, and then that creates high performance, right? It's not just the specifics of the employee working, but it's how they're accomplishing their work. For an example, one of the values, particularly we've worked with utilities, is the number one value is safety. And whether you work for a police department or a fire department, that is probably a top value of that organization. Yes. That everybody wants to come to work and go home safely. And so if you start your meetings, if you start your day thinking about that value, then you say, okay, the work that I need to perform, am I doing that with this value in mind? And if you can say yes to that, then you're starting to create high performance. You're starting to get to things like it impacts engagement for your employees, because now they're highly engaged with the values of the company. Working with another organization, we talk about bringing in top talent, right? How do we get top talent into our doors? And we talk about all the things like onboarding and technology and all those things. But unless you have a high-performing culture, the problem won't be getting them in the door. The problem will be retaining them. Because a high performer wants to work in a culture that helps them with that high performance, that they know what the beliefs and the characteristics and the values of that organization is. That's what will make them stay, is when they feel that everybody's moving in the same direction. So that's when I think about the importance of this topic and what it means to me.
Yeah, you touched on a couple of things that are really important. And for me, there's 2 sides. There's your culture is what the leader rewards, recognizes, and tolerates.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you will get what you reward, what you recognize, and what you tolerate.
Yes. That's good.
Now, how do you make sure that everyone's operating off the same sheet of music, including the leader, around rewards, recognition, and what you tolerate? Yes. And that comes to what you were talking about. And the way that I do that is I visualize it. I give my teams a poster. It's called Strategy Mountain. At the very top of the mountain is a little flag that here's what the wind looks like. Here's where we're going. At the top of the mountain has a little flag. Here's where we're going. Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's the hill we need to climb. And there are milestones along the way that says, here's how we know we're making progress. Yeah. Those are our priorities. Now, the path up the mountain is constrained by two things: our values and our principles. Our values tell us who we are, because there are multiple ways to get up the mountain. There's multiple ways to achieve it.
Yes.
Ways that are in alignment with your values and things that are out of alignment with your values. And so they're constrained from the bottom by our values, because that tells us who we are, and constrained by the top by our principles. And our principles tell us how do we make decisions.
Yes.
Because your values are all equal. Your principles are in order.
That's good.
Your values are all equal. Your principles are in order. Because they will tell you how you will make a decision.
Yes.
Because some principles are more important than others. And if you have to make a trade-off, because this world is all about trade-offs,
Yes.
you trade them off in order. You never trade off a value.
Yes.
You never compromise who you are. But there are times when you may need to compromise principle in order to win. And I build this for my teams to say, here are our values, here are our principles, here are our milestones, the things that we need to accomplish, that tells us our priorities, and here's what the win looks like.
Yeah.
And a very simple visual that then says, I will be held accountable to this, just like we all are.
Yeah.
And so here's when we step away from our values, we will use this to pull us back. When we compromise a higher principle for a lower one, this is what we're going to use to bring us back. When we get off kilter in terms of, are we actually executing work in alignment with our priorities, we're going to use this to bring us back. And so if you give your teams that simple visual, it doesn't have to be a strategy mountain.
Yeah.
I found that to be very effective.
Yeah.
Because people can see the little man or a little person climbing the mountain. So as you achieve your milestones, you move the little person along the trail. The performance kicker that you get is the high performance know they just need to, they're off.
Yeah.
The folks that may be struggling with performance, if they're struggling because of a lack of clarity, you've now provided that.
Yes.
If they're struggling because they're lacking a support system, they now know what they need support with or for. And if they're struggling for other reasons, then you can, handle those in other ways. But if the performance issue comes from a cultural issue, you have addressed it.
Yes.
And then, of course, you then have to make sure that as a leader, you are rewarding, recognizing, and not tolerating deviations.
Yes.
Which is really, really important. And so I've executed this 3 times on 3 different teams. And the transformation is dramatic. Because when you set the expectation, you're deliberate about the bar. Because it's really one thing to say you have a high bar, which I do. It's another thing to say, here's what it looks like to clear it. Here's what the win looks like. Here's how you know you're meeting the expectations. Here it is. And if you are able to do that, the vast majority of folks rise to the occasion.
Yes.
They rise to the occasion. Folks that don't want to rise to the occasion, they opt out. They self-select out. And so the amount of energy you as a leader have to expend in terms of managing people who don't want to be there drops.
Yes.
But that requires you to have done the work, right?
Yes.
The other thing that I would say to that, and this was a coaching that I gave to one of my directors, as he was looking to do something for his organization, in order to have a high-performing organization, you need buy-in. And as you're traveling the road, don't you go off and create strategy mountain and hand it to them.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
That is something that must be co-authored. It must be co-authored. They have to have a say in their destiny. Because if you build it together, even though as the leader, you're still steering the ship.
Yes.
But if you build that destiny together, you'll get the buy-in.
Yes.
And you'll get an early warning indicator of who's not going to buy in,
Yes.
which is invaluable information
Yes.
in terms of where you may need to provide some additional assistance or provide an exit.
Right.
Because it's okay for everyone not to make it.
Yeah.
It's okay for folks to say, this isn't for me. And it's also okay for you to say, this isn't for you.
Yes.
All of those things go into building that high performing culture.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And I like the reward, recognize, and tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I have studied companies that do an outstanding job with the rewards and recognition piece. One of those companies that come to mind and have done a lot of studying and research around is Disney.
Mm-hmm.
They do just a phenomenal job with their culture, and a big part of their culture is rewards and recognition. Have modeled some of that culture at other companies, and they actually built a phenomenal rewards and recognition system so that all employees are engaged in that rewards and recognition. That's not just a leader responsibility, although leaders have that responsibility and should absolutely be rewarding and recognizing people for exhibiting and behaving in that high-performing culture the way that is expected. But it was just amazing to see the peers and the different levels of recognition and reward in that Disney model, right? Because looking through their system, you almost got as many peer recognitions as you did leader recognitions, and the employees actually held those peer recognitions to a higher regard than the leader, because when you are recognized by your peers, it's just a whole different ball game. And so that is just key to that culture, is not only the leaders having an opportunity to recognize those who are behaving as expected in that culture, that high-performing culture, but having the peers do it, and having doesn't have to be a technology solution. So don't go off and think you got to build this, elaborate technology scheme, but just have a way that employees can recognize, and the rewards don't have to be monetary or big outstanding awards. They were simple, very simple things, as small as you got. Some of the rewards is when you receive so many recognitions from your peers, you got an icon trophy that you could put in your email. So that when now you send out an email to anybody in the company or even external, they saw kind of certification that you got, and it just made the employees proud of what they were doing in that space. So I love the rewards and recognition piece. And then tolerate is just a subject all of itself. When you talk about what leaders tolerate and what a culture will tolerate, when you have a high-performing culture, it actually helps the leader because the culture will pull an individual back. Their peers will pull you back. That's when you know you're really high-performing, is when before you can correct the behavior or give that feedback, it's coming from someplace else because the culture doesn't tolerate it. And they're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I brought up safety as one. If you get ready to do something unsafe and you have a high-performing culture, the peers around you will say, stop. That is unsafe. We're not doing it that way. And they will stop the behavior and correct it. You think about sports teams, the coach has captains. The captains will step in and call a meeting and pull everybody into the locker room and say, we need to get it together. The coach doesn't have to do that because a winning, high-performing team won't allow an individual to bring that culture down. They will stop it in its tracks, and that is the real indicator that it's high-performing, is when those things are happening, on top of the leaders still having their responsibility and ownership to make sure it's a high-performing culture. The culture plays a big part in making sure that those things stay true.
I agree. It doesn't have to be big. It can be really small. I would have a team for my team, a Microsoft team for my team,
Yeah.
and I would always create a recognition channel.
Mm-hmm.
So even in addition to the traditional recognition system that HR may put in place,
Yes.
which is important and valuable,
Yes.
all you could do is just post in there recognitions for folks. And then what we would do is we'd gather them for the town halls and all hands, and that would be the source of getting those communicated out. And we didn't do any more than that. Like if you wanted the additional trinkets things that are good and the monetary rewards that can come along with that, we definitely use the HR system. And it's an and, it's not an or.
Right.
And so one of the things that the leaders would do is, because you had to approve the HR thing, is they would take them out of the HR system and put them in the channel as well. So that, because the more recognition and the more names you can tie to that, the more meaningful it becomes and the more prolific it becomes and the more people will leverage it. But the piece around, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And once you get it going in the right direction, we'll keep going.
Yes.
And it's really important because the leader's role is in making sure that the positive aspects of the culture continue and the negative aspects of the culture are greatly reduced as much as possible. Now, you have to remember that an organization is a reflection of its leader.
Yes. Yes.
And your faults as that leader will show up in that organization.
Yes.
And so the other piece of building a high-performing culture is understanding your faults and where you have blind spots.
Yeah.
But it's a blind spot, so how do you see it? Which means you've got to have folks that have the courage to tell you when you may be doing something that's counter to the culture you are trying to create. If you do not have a person that is doing that for you and you are a leader, you are not fully servicing the team that you're leading. You have to have someone that is pointing out the blind spots. Now that may be a coach, that may be a peer, maybe a leader. It may be a subordinate that you've built that relationship with that's willing to say, hey, that's not in alignment with what we agreed to. But you have to have someone that is willing to do that for you in order for you to build that culture, because you cannot build it without it. Because as a human, and leaders are human, and you are far from perfect, those faults will show up in your organization. Those dysfunctions that you hold as a person will show up in your organization unless you put in a compensating mechanism. And you have to do that. That is not optional.
That's good. That's good. And what you made me think of is we talk about culture as if it's one thing and it's grandiose. So there's a macro and there's micro cultures. When you said, the leader is responsible for that organization and that culture, that reminded me that it isn't just one culture. The micro cultures add up to the macro.
Yes.
So your organization has its own culture. Each organization inside of that company has its own culture.
Yes.
What the executives are trying to get is the macro to be, what they aspired. But in order to do that, then the leadership team and its micro cultures have to start building. And you keep saying building performance culture. The key to that topic is building. So you have to build this, because if you're not deliberate about your micro culture and that macro culture, just know there is a culture with or without you.
Yes.
Right? So whether you are paying it attention, being deliberate about your culture or not, the team that I brought up at the start, that I talked about, didn't really have a culture, didn't know their values. It was apparent when we were in this workshop. They actually had a culture. It was not high performing, but that culture was one of arguments, people not on the same page, people just letting things go, a lot of tolerance in the organization. that was their culture. So just know, if you are a leader who is not paying attention to its microculture, to its organization, there is a culture there, whether you like it or not. You need to build a high-performing culture. And so what we're talking about is how you do that. Build those microcultures so that they end up being the macro culture of high performance that you want. And it's not, companies get this wrong all the time. They think, oh, we're going to build this culture. And it's one thing. And it's one culture. You have to also look at the microcultures, and depending on that organization and its influence in the company, it could be derailing your macro culture, and executives are trying to figure out why, what's going on, how come this isn't sticking? It's because you have a leader and a part of your organization that is tolerating something that is not in alignment with where you're trying to go, and it's derailing everything you're trying to do.
You have to acknowledge the microcultures and honor them.
Yes.
Because what high performance looks like in an office environment and what high performance looks like in an operational environment and a field environment, they share a lot of the same qualities, but they show up different.
Yeah.
And so you got to honor that.
Yes.
And so, again, to your point, thinking about culture as this monolithic thing doesn't really help in terms of making sure you're moving the ball down the field. And at the same time, you can't underestimate the impact of leader change when it comes to culture.
Yes.
Because an organization is a reflection of its leader, absolutely. And therefore, one of the most impactful things to culture are leader changes.
Yes.
And so, at the same company, when the CEO changes, it's startling the impact that can have on the overall culture.
Yes.
I've gone through 4 CEO changes, and being there pre and post.
Yes.
And the cultures are fundamentally different.
Yes.
Same company, same people, for the most part, day to day, same mission, and the culture is tangibly different. I've gone through chief information officer changes, same thing. Again, a little bit smaller scale, but the cultures are different because what they value changes. And your values tell you who you are. And if you change who you are, which happens when you change leaders, because they value different things, the culture will shift along with it. Because that is right in alignment with what is reward, recognized, and tolerated.
Absolutely.
I hear you, 100%.
Yeah. And when I'm talking with executives, CEOs, CIOs, the C-suite, and they talk about their legacy, one of the things that comes up in that conversation is culture.
Fascinating.
And what culture they want to leave behind. And so that leads us into a conversation around, well, what is your current culture? And as you begin your transition out, what changes do you want to make to get to the culture that you want to leave behind? And are those two things different? And so that's an interesting conversation for 2 reasons. One, to hear the difference between the current culture and the legacy they want to leave in terms of culture and how those are different. And then, of course, the how to get there. Right?
Yeah, and so that is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
Because the moment you exit, that culture will change to who shows up. And so, as a leader, wanting culture to be a legacy feels oxymoronic to me. It's like, that can't possibly be your legacy, because the moment you are gone, the culture will become a reflection of the leader who steps in. And so, I am fascinated by this. And I know we're at time, but we're going to have to continue this conversation because I want to know more about this legacy when it comes to culture.
That's good. That's good. All right, so we are at the end of our time on our topic today, which is building a high performance culture. And I want to leave you with this. A winning culture is built through leadership, not luck. So again, it goes back to you need to build the type of culture you aspire and not just leave it to luck or chance. And with that, we will see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to Leadership Unfiltered. We hope you have found value in our conversation and are ready to take action in your leadership journey. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. And don't forget to connect with us on social media for more leadership insights and resources. Until next time, keep leading with purpose.